center ourselves and take a couple of deep breaths, shake whatever you need to shake. Leave everything that happened before right now out of this space. We're about to collectively unite in the beautiful work that we've done together, that we do individually. And we just have to know that we are powerhouses. We are warrior women. We are makers, doers, creators, birthers. And we're also standing at the edge of like just so much change that we are also a part of by doing this work. So just channel that, all that amazing powerfulness into yourselves. I'm really excited to do this with you guys. I am really, truly honored.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. And you know what? I'm going to leave that in the recording because that applies collectively to every single soul out there. You are all powerhouses, creators, manifestors, and you can do this. Whatever you're doing, whatever your soul gift is, you can connect to and make it happen. And you are supported in this collective community. A phrase that came to mind as I was awake all night long was that for this Joyspring event, you know, I have up there right now that we are, you know, wanting to make joy the new normal, but really the root is that from, you know, that joy springs from the well of community. And so this is what we've done in our very little, small, intimate Unschooling Squad, and we created a little community to be able to work with all that we journey with as parents, as unschooling parents, and you know, the challenges, the grief, the little miracles and joy, and everything in between. And then sometimes also just old grief or something comes up that is not related to parenting, but you know, we have this community that then we can hold this space for each other to show up as we are and be held and supported and kind of normalize our experience as humans. So who we are, that's how we came together. We're a bunch of homeschooling moms in the neighborhood of Essex County, New Jersey. And we've been homeschooling together with our families for years and years. And we, you know, one of our very social gatherings, you know, little conversations started to percolate, and eventually, you know, Maria got this idea that resonated with Lisa, and Lisa's been talking about, you know, unschooling, and Michal and myself, and it was time. It just came together and it happened, and we started supporting each other and meeting monthly as a book club, but it's so much more than an unschooling book club. So I'll read a little bit about ourselves as an introduction, and then we'll just launch into what we're here to share. Lisa Guillard.
You know what? It's a huge family, and like half of them say Guillard and the other half say Guillard, so I'm good with either.
Lisa is a photographer, children's rights advocate, and novice musician, not so novice, I would say, who has spent the past 12 years discovering and being fascinated by how children learn. Her experience and interests span nonviolent communication, self-directed education, meditation, and yoga, as well as building intentional communities. Lisa is a mother to 3 unschooling humans who constantly inspire her in ways she never imagined. She believes that children thrive in an environment of authentic acceptance. A founding member of the Unschooling Squad, she loves to talk about the ways in which families can flourish by shifting the parenting paradigm and choosing a self-directed path. Elisa provides practical and compassionate support to parents and welcomes contact from anyone interested in unschooling and bringing more peace and connection to life with children. Ana Maria Nichim Luna Toporek. How do you pronounce that last name?
You did it just right.
I did it.
Perfect.
Ana Maria is a mother of 3 unschooling children, wife, educator, artist, and community organizer. She has spent the last 16 years in the practicum of holistic parenting and learning, part of the Latinx community, Maya Mexican community, and of mixed Jewish background. Ana Maria has integrated a multicultural lens through all of her work. Inspired by her own indigenous roots, Ana Maria has followed the path of what she calls indigenous intelligence as it relates to family building, community building, and learning. In recent years, Ana Maria has been inspired by the work of Akila Richards, Malika Diggs, and Pamela Rickia. In their wisdom, she has found the guidance to delve even deeper into the deschooling process toward building and supporting a liberated life for herself and her loved ones. She welcomes you to connect with her with any questions and is particularly interested in supporting Latinx folks who are wanting to join this path. Ana Maria considers herself a lucky member of the Unschooling Squad, a book club turned support group of the unschooling warrior mamas in northern New Jersey. Michal Mehler. All Michal ever wanted to be was a teacher. She had 18 years of experience as a special education teacher in Israel before moving to the US. Besides being a full-time radical unschooling mother to her 9-year-old daughter, Michal is a holistic health practitioner. Graceful ease.
Thanks, Dhyana.
And I'm going to put all this information and contact information under the replay video for folks who want to connect. For myself, I'll simply say I'm a mother, unschooler of 2 children, and a psychospiritual therapist, and I use all the tools, I try to use all the tools I've learned throughout my life in helping to raise children that are unfettered by a lot of the oppressive conditioning and constraints that I inherited and was steeped in. So let's move right into it. Thank you guys for agreeing to do this live. This is our first time, the big learning curve for all of us in different ways. I would love to pose the question first to Lisa. What is unschooling?
All right, well, unschooling is really hard to define, you know, because it's a lifestyle. It's not simply an educational philosophy, but that's where most people come to it. And in terms of education, I'd say it's, you know, creating and maintaining an environment where natural learning can flourish. Humans are born with innate capabilities to self-educate. And I think as an unschooler, you know, the goal is to provide those optimal conditions so that kids can learn because they love to learn. They're capable of learning, and with support and facilitation by the adults in their life, they can learn anything and everything that they want to. I think unschooling is also kind of a human rights issue. Children are born whole, and by, you know, authoritarian practices and conventional non-consensual schooling and cultural practices, we are stripping children of their power. And so as an unschooler, you know, I consider it my job to question everything that I'm doing with my children, for my children, to my children, and in hopes of like, is this going to nurture our relationship? Is this going to support their innate capabilities, or am I detracting from them? So yes, I think unschooling is just, it's choosing to live in consensual partnership with children. It's choosing to meet their needs, and it's choosing to trust their innate capabilities to self-educate, and it's enabling their autonomy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you about covered it. I'm wondering if Michal or Maria, you wanted to add to the definition or your experience of unschooling. No, Lisa, I mean, Maria.
Let me see. Okay, now I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. So great to join you here. And I think what I would like to add is that for me, unschooling became a door that was similar to an indigenous practice, you know, and having been raised close to my Tzeltal Maya community, for me, when I began to read and understand what schooling was calling for as a lifestyle, I mean, I had an immediate mirror with indigenous ways. So for me, it always often has been difficult using the word unschooling as a way to define what our lifestyle is like. And I often like to really relate it to the indigenous ways, which was collectivism, community, learning across ages together. I mean, we can name all these different areas which are very much part of indigenous life that were destroyed forcefully throughout the generations of colonization. So for me, when we talk about unschooling, I always really want to bring that piece as well, that these are indigenous ways. These are ways that have been time immemorial in our human becoming as we became societies and communities. And I wouldn't want to say that it's just a new thing, it's a new concept, or that, you know, some man at some point wrote a book about it. I want to say that this is a very natural way of functioning as human societies.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I also came to unschooling sort of organically. I mean, through attachment parenting, and even that I didn't know that term existed. It was just the natural, you know, when we're connected to our bodies, when we're connected to our intuition, our power, our knowledge that we you know, have been doing this for thousands of years. You know, school is what, 400 years old, this current education system?
Oh, I think it's even less. I think it's
300?
It's like 200.
200? Yeah, so this is, you know, going back way further, we've been giving birth for longer than 200 years, and we've been raising children successfully for eons. And so my husband and I just were connected to our children. And when it came time to follow the sort of roadmap, you know, the current mainstream dominant culture roadmap to put the child in school all day at age 1.5 or 2, it just didn't make sense. We started to you know, go through the path of just, you know, interviewing schools and, you know, investigating, and because that's what you're supposed to do, but really it never sat well with us, and we ended up homeschooling very early on. And the way we were parenting, you know, attachment parenting and reading books, like we didn't even realize we were doing that. And eventually, just organically, we moved into what is now unschooling, just by listening deeply and observing the joy, you know, following the joy of our child, really. You know, when we tried putting her in school, like that light, that joy, it just flickered out, and we're like, whoa, this is not my joyful child. This is her, you know, her light is not shining. So yeah, just supporting that. And that's why I think, Maria, you came up with the title for this, you know, following, working, you know, toward joy with our children. I want to move into an example for people, because the part of the purpose of getting together and presenting this live was to show people and inspire other parents to organize collectively and create their own, you know, intimate circles where they have rituals to connect in this way. And so we've been meeting, and what we do when we meet is we kind of go into this sort of roundtable discussion, either, you know, quoting from books or bringing something that's currently up. And we wanted to focus on a topic that came up recently, a theme really that's kind of repetitive in this whole process of something called deschooling, which we'll get to later, but trust versus control. So I want to open up our panel discussion to that now, if anybody wants to take the first step and voice what has been coming up for you around trust and control in working, you know, partnering with your children.
Well, I guess I would say it's not so much an issue that's come up for me, but just in thinking about, you know, preparing for this and just what I'm thinking about all the time, because I'm very, very into this idea of supporting children as they are. And I kind of came to this idea that, you know, conventional parenting, like modern day parenting today, is really about schooling. Like it's kind of like the function of a parent is to help your child do well in school. And in conventional schooling, you know, the goal is kind of, it's how to get children to comply with the expectations of the institution of school. And by extension, how to get children to comply with their parents' wishes, right? Which is all control. And in unschooling, we are trying to replace that control with the idea of trust. And, you know, I had this funny idea that when my first daughter was born, I brought this, had this teeny tiny baby, and I remember being so exhausted, but I couldn't sleep because I was like, how will I know she's breathing? You know, if I fall asleep, how will I know that she's still breathing? And so, you know, I had her next to me, and I'd find myself sort of falling asleep and jerking back awake, like, oh my gosh, I fell asleep, you know, and then checking, and oh, she's breathing, you know, and then doing that. And I don't know, a couple of days, but then eventually it's like I had to trust that she was going to breathe, because that's her capability. She's born with the ability to breathe. I had to trust that so that I could live, you know, even so that I could like live and breathe as a person. And this relates to learning, right? Like there's so much messaging around this idea that like our kids, like learning is hard, like learning to read is hard, like math is hard. We need to start drilling the skills earlier and earlier so that they're ready for school. And we've forgotten to trust that kids like learning. You know, we don't teach kids how to talk, we talk to them. You know, we don't teach kids how to walk, we make sure that they have a space where they can play freely and things they can pull up on that aren't going to fall down on them. And we hold their hands if they want us to, but we're not like, okay, it's 10 a.m. on Monday morning and now we're going to do walking lessons. And we get the little baby up and we make them walk, you know, and we give them a reward if they do their walking practice. And if they don't, we say, oh, you know what, you can't play with your toy because you didn't walk, you know, up to my expectations. We don't do that, but we do that around every other kind of learning. And it's not only unnecessary, but it's really damaging to a child's sense of self, like what they're capable of. And then they begin to think that learning to read is hard and doing math is hard and that it's not fun. And in reality, like they love these things. They love to explore the world around them. So back to this idea of trust and control, it's that eventually we have to, if we want to walk down this path of unschooling and we want to really enable our children's innate curiosity and drive to learn, we need to trust them. We need to trust that they are capable and that they are willing and that we have the tools to help them. And if we don't know what the tools are, guess what? We can ask them directly. Like we don't need to look to someone else's curriculum or some state mandated program about what does this normal 7-year-old, because the thing is, it's not normal. We're all individual. We each have our own gifts. We each have our own interests, and that's a good thing. So yeah, I think that's another thing too with unschooling. When I talk about what is unschooling, well, unschooling is like supporting the needs of individuals. And if you support, like you just look at the kid in front of you and you kind of make it your goal to support them, not control, but like, what do you need? What, you know, what is it you're into? Oh, you like toads? Well, like, here's 1,000 books on toads, and here are all these videos on toads, and we can go outside and look for toads. It can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be anything like, oh, my kid likes bugs, so now I'm gonna make a curriculum out of the bugs, because living is the curriculum, and each person is their own curriculum. And so that's the shift, you know, instead of trying to make your kid into a reader, just trust that they will read because they love frogs. And eventually there's going to be something that they want to read about frogs. And so they're going to do it.
Michal, you want to speak? Just, yeah, unmute yourself.
Just wanted to connect the idea of trust and what was the other option?
Control.
Control. As if I wanted to forget. To our meetings, and to say that I think that at the end of the day, what like the ongoing thing that's going along our meetings is that we want to build this trust, and sometimes trust can be very scary. And I think that we use the books as an excuse to meet, but at the end of the day, we're needing to support each other on this adventure of being trustful of everything in our life, because some of us have been unschooling from day one, and there is not so much a process of deschooling, perhaps for the mothers or the fathers, like the parents, but not for the children. But I think that we're going together through a process of deschooling control and learning to trust ourselves, learning to trust our families, and really helping and supporting each other on this journey of trust and allowing everything to happen and just exploring it freely without, as much as possible, fear. And that's all I wanted to say.
Are we allowed to speak, or we're just planning?
You can speak. We're going to save the questions for later on. If you want to not forget a question, you can always type it into the chat box. That would be great.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll write down.
I wanted to speak to this issue of trust and control, if I can add a little bit. I really want to share that for me, getting to a place of trust has been really challenging, because coming from a multicultural background, coming from a community that are people of color, a community that has been disenfranchised systematically for generations, particularly around education, and particularly around the support towards learning. And for me, having to retract, like really peel myself off this process of learning, which is conventional schooling and education, has been painful, has been difficult. And that to free myself from that has taken years, even within my unschooling practice, within my own family. You know, I had gone through my master's degree, I had studied about holistic education processes, and, you know, I had done all of that. And even with all that preparation, you know, I'm indigenous, I've been around that kind of space, and even with all that experience and all that learning that I had gone through, when I became a parent, and having been a parent for 16 years, my unschooling process has been painful. And so getting to a place of trust with my child or with my children, really, as Michal said it so well, has been a process of looking back at my own idea of what education represents in my body, what is valued, how I value myself based on all that learning experience, based on all that education, how my community uses education to free themselves, to get access, So I had to really process all these things, and it's trust me, it's an ongoing thing. I can't even say, in all honesty, that I'm gotten to this place of like true liberation or true self-determination within myself. No, absolutely not. I can imagine that this is going to take me even more years. But my point is that as we peel the layers off conditioning, that does happen through the education system, because that system is created for control. There couldn't be an education system, a public education system, where you can unschool. It would be a very difficult thing to achieve. You know, part of the process of public schooling is to control the populace, to give one set of information, one way of becoming a citizen to a large amount of people. And so it's difficult to peel away layers when you're in that context. But for us, and speaking for myself, stepping away from that context has given me a bird's eye view of the different layers that we have to peel. And trust is huge, because there's so many moments through this unschooling process where your child has been on the screen for 3 months watching this one thing, and you are thinking, oh my God, my child is going to be a screen junkie, my child is not, whatever, you know, all kinds of things come up. But the difference, where it's different here in terms of being an unschooling facilitator, is that that child is not isolated. That child is not having that experience with the screen without support. And I'm gonna use the example of one of my children who is really much into gaming and will spend 10 hours on the screen gaming. This child washes dishes with me every night, and we're discussing his experience on the screen. So I know, not only do I know the world that he's involved with within that context, I know the gamers he plays with, I know what it means to build guilds on Minecraft, I understand how they're building networks within their guilds and choosing leadership and roles and organizing. I mean, there's so much going on. And I only understand this because there's presence, because I value what he's going through. I'm not judging this idea that what he's doing is not going to help him in his life. No, we are together looking at this experience and understanding what the value of it is for all of us, for our entire family. So I know I'm digressing a little bit, but my point is that there were moments, a lot of moments through my journey in getting into this place of support for my child, where I became very afraid. And that fear is paralyzing. That fear will turn you into, I don't know, you will find that rage again of just like, oh, no, my child cannot be doing that. My child needs to get his degrees. My child needs to go to school tomorrow. It really races so much within us. But that is where, as Michal and all of us have stated, you know, the deschooling process is what is our guiding light towards being able to be with those moments, find the value in those moments. And if it wasn't for this unschooling squad, trust me, my kids would be in school right now, because the unschooling squad and what we've been able to achieve together is use books like Parenting for Social Change, use books like The Daily Groove, which was an amazing book, use different books, awesome, different books from various authors that have been thinking and doing this for years, who have children who are adults, and then using each other's experience to then come to the table and say, you know, girls, how many times have you been on tears in our meetings? Like, we've been like bawling about things that are truly difficult to address. And if it wasn't for this sisterhood, this community, I think that this particular lifestyle would be difficult to achieve in isolation. So I just want to name that part of that getting into trust is finding support for yourself as someone who has been schooled for their entire life, as someone who has is needing to peel those layers. Like, find your support group, find your supporting resources, yeah, and get in this dialogue.
Thank you, Maria. You really elucidated almost everything that we had written up a little, or one of us wrote this. I just wanted to read it. I was about to pull that up, and then you just summarized it all. But that we gathered to read a book and meet in person once a month to discuss what we've read and the ways in which we are striving to apply unschooling philosophy in our daily lives. We share our struggles, hold each other accountable for positive change, and learn together. We thrive and benefit from each other's authentic acceptance, encouragement, and support, just like our children do. And we understand each other as we are all on a journey to shift the parenting paradigm from one of control to trust and freedom in our relationships with our children. And both you and Michal mentioned the thing that was, coming up for me to talk about in relationship to control was that fear, is what steps in usually, underneath that drive to control. It's whether it's something having to do with an experience we had as a child and how our actions were perceived by our parents and how we integrated that into our physical and psychological, bodies, where we have this kind of trigger response of, no, you can't do that. I think of on a playground when, Vivian, my eldest, who's 12 now, was just 1, and she was barely, crawling and starting to like get up on 1 foot in her crawl. And I was, letting her explore, this baby toddler playground designed for that, right? But there are other parents, or I think it was a nanny in the neighborhood, who was not letting her toddler venture up the ladder, but right, if our children are, going back to Lisa's point of naturally inquisitive learners and seeking to experience and expand their abilities just by nature, the child is going to explore and may stumble, may fall, right? But because they're curious about this, either the ladder or what's at the top of it, they're not going to be able to climb it unless they're capable of it. But if you start inserting fear into the equation, like, oh, don't do that, you're going to fall, then you take away, you infuse the natural curiosity and inquisitiveness with a fear of the unknown, and projecting an outcome in the future that may or may not exist if you had just, let the child be. And we see that in ourselves as adults, that's been ingrained in us. It prevents us from speaking, our voice. We know, and I mentioned this in another conversation recently, just yesterday, the phrase, children should be seen and not heard. These things, whether they're phrases or like, no fear to, stop us from doing something, they get ingrained, and then they become barriers to learning, to natural learning, to our self-motivated, inquisitive learning, because we become terrified. There's this sense of like, I'm going to be annihilated if I try to do that. Or, oh my God, she is doing that. How can she, expand her energy and express herself so fully and beautifully, right? Because we're taught to be small and hide ourselves and don't rock the boat in so many ways. And so this is what we're trying to do, get out of the way and let our children's light shine and become who they want to be, who they're meant to be, and not dictate that through a lens of fear and control. And I come up, just like Maria was talking about, you know, I've had a lot of training in psychotherapy and Eastern and Western spirituality and like Buddhist meditation, and all these tools and skills I have fail me when so much of this underlying programming from the time I was born, or even in the womb, you know, was really being written before I was able to speak. So that's what we're, you know, de-schooling, decolonizing our minds with this dominant culture, this more recent, you know, there's some great intellectual, wonderful, creative, you know, ingenuity out of modern life, but there's also a lot of destruction and a lot of oppression and a lot of just destroying nature across the board within us and on the earth. And so that's what we're trying to get back to in how we work, collaborate. You know, I love that, partnering with our children. We're not, you know, little dictators. We're not, you know, the petty tyrant at home, you know, but that's how we were raised, with these relationships, you know, and then you see them in schools, the bullies. It's just passed down. We don't mean to, but we, you know, the programming kicks in, and then we have to, like, really, to stop that, we have to do a lot of self-reflection and slowing down, you know, all these tools like meditation, giving space to be able to notice what's going on inside, you know, to really acknowledge, oh wait, this is fear. They're going to be okay. I don't have to intervene. I don't even have to say anything. But sometimes we don't, and we get in our way, and we get in our children's way, and I feel terrible about it. And I know, you know, the work that still needs to be done. And so, yeah, I encourage people to create their really intimate group to connect and do this work together. Because, you know, large group is great. We were doing that for a while, but it's really hard to then risk being vulnerable in a large group, and also the time to dive into and allow the space for, you know, one or two people to share deeply and have, you know, reflection and be held. It becomes a little more superficial in a larger group for, like, you know, an hour or 2 hour long meeting. You know, this work is like, you could do a whole retreat and work on like one thing in your life. So yeah.
I just wanted to add too, like, you know, this deschooling process, this process that, you know, Maria started talking about, of peeling back these layers, it's never going to end. You know, it's an ongoing process, because we're also ongoing. We're changing constantly, and our kids are changing constantly. And there's always going to be new situations that present themselves as our children grow, that we're going to have the opportunity to examine, like, oh, I'm feeling like bad about this, or I'm feeling scared, or I'm feeling nervous, or I'm feeling like I want to control this. Like, what's that about? And I think that it's going to happen always. And I guess I just wanted to say too, like, it's okay to change your mind when you're presented with new information, right? And I think this is like a really, it shouldn't be a mind-blowing thing, but in a way it really is, because, you know, we go through, we all went to school, right? We all went to a conventional school, and in school, the goal is to get an A, right? How do you get a 90%? It's by answering 90% of the questions correct. The goal is to get the correct answer. It's not about exploration and discovery. It's about being correct. So we get in this habit of, like, being correct is the most important thing, which makes being wrong really scary. Or even the idea of, like, changing your mind, like, oh, I have this new information and I want to shift my thoughts on it, can be scary, but it's imperative. You know, we're always learning. We always have the chance to change our minds on something. And I think that you know, part of the deschooling process and why I think it is painful is also because, I mean, me personally, I feel like there have been so many moments where I just felt like, gosh, I was like really believing a lie. You know, I was really buying into this idea that there's a certain way to live and there's a certain way to be, and that is to like get the best grades I can. And, you know, dress in the way that like these people are dressing because I want to be accepted by, you know, and it's a construct of school that, again, I'm going to say, unfortunately, parenting is the extension. They're the arms that hold this construct together, because as a parent, like, you want your kid to do well in school so that they can do well in college, so that they can get a good job. But like, we can always change our mind. And I was actually laughing, or not laughing, but just thinking about the fact that, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the SATs have been canceled for 4 years, right? For 4 years, there are going to be no SAT tests. And in 2019, if you had said, oh, the SATs aren't necessary, that people would be like, of course they're necessary. We need the SATs. How else do kids prove that they've learned? And here, something changed, and the whole country has just written off the SATs. We're gonna put those SATs away for 4 years, and like, we can all change our mind. Like, school is not the only way, but it makes you believe that it is. And I think that that's the damaging part of it. And that's why it's so hard to look at this in like from an outside way, because that idea of doing well in school, complying with the school rules, playing that school game well will make your life good is so ingrained in us from even before we go to school, because, you know, our parents just want us to do well in the world, and that's the way they were taught that we're going to do a good job. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in there, that it's not the only way. And in fact, I'd say as many individuals as there are that many individual ways to live and to learn. And yeah, you can't go wrong by supporting individuals.
You remind me of something I read somewhere. There was a child who loved marine biology and scuba diving, and they would have never found a track for that in school, but they managed to find their bliss job unschooling, you know, because they followed their intrinsic, you know, interest. They're intrinsically motivated, and followed where their heart led them. And there's so many jobs in the world. It doesn't always have to lead to a desk job, or, you know, these tracks, these pipelines from school to wherever the dominant culture, you know, is kind of leading you, whether that's, you know, I'll say it, even whether that's to prison or to chained to a desk job. It's really kind of yeah, the word enslavement is coming up. And it's much more liberating to follow your creative energy where it's meant to lead you. And who knows where that may be. And this world needs that. We need solutions that aren't pre-written to solve the world's problems. We need creative thinkers, people who are going to do things and come up with solutions that they're not going to find in a textbook at school. So anybody want to say anything more? Like, we've jumped right into the deschooling conversation that we wanted to have. And this is a really huge piece about, you know, unschooling. There's that process that goes on for, I think, our lifetime, as you mentioned, about really moving from schoolishness to this more holistic, organic way of being in partnership. And for people just coming out of school, the recommendation is just don't even try to figure out any structure, do anything. Just let your kids and yourself just kind of go with the flow and see where it leads you. Michal, I think you want to say something?
But I didn't want to interrupt you, only wanted to, are you done? Just wanted to say, let's watch the time. I think there are many questions, and I think there can be beautiful conversations out of these questions. So maybe we give some time for that now.
Michal, do you want to begin to address some of the questions that you're seeing?
Sure, I'd love to, but do I go by order or by what intrigued me most?
By what you have an answer for, sure.
So Claudine asked something that we often discuss. I know we talked about it more than once, and she says, maybe I'll find her question here. Maybe she wants to ask it herself, like how to trust when we let our children. Here, Claudine, just say it yourself, Alan.
Okay, hi. So my question is, especially with being in quarantine, so many activities are just not available. And so media definitely has become something that's utilized more, especially in our family, as we were not really using a lot of media. And so the question is really, how do you help? It's not more like how do you trust your child, but how do you trust the media in the sense of that the internet is out there and it's the other people on the other side that you can't, so to say, trust, and we're trusting our children. How do you guide your children at different levels and ages? Because a 16-year-old and a 10-year-old are just different conversations, I would think, to give them the tools and the support to make the right decisions, to utilize media in a safe and healthy way.
So only in 2 words, because I'm sure everyone else has a lot more to say. I think the way we build this trust in our family is just talking about it a lot. So we're here, we're right here with her. So when she finds out that people do or suggest things that are perhaps dangerous or inappropriate, or just being bullies, anything, she's right there with us, and she'll address it to us. And sometimes we help her even, type in the answers. Or we say, you know what, if it was me that was addressed this way by someone else, I'd say this or that, or report them, or, if they're in Roblox, for instance, we're there to discuss it with her. And I think that as time passes, I build more trust in her ability to really, notice when people are untrustful with her, and maybe she should leave the game. And we also talked about playing in groups, so making, speaking with other children about, to just play together. I'll let everyone else address it in better English.
Your English is wonderful.
If I may now, I just wanted to add that sometimes it's a false alarm, and not everybody is distrustful or, trying to get her. And this is also something that need guidance, like, this might not have been addressed to you. So a lot of time there's a lot of commotion about nothing that wasn't even addressed to her or something like that. So the steering or the guidance or the, external referencing can be both ways. I mean, positive and negative. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
I have, I can talk about this for forever and ever, so I'll try and keep it short. I'll just say, well, one thing that I find that I'm constantly surprised by how savvy my kids are, like having grown up, and they've been unschooled, but I think we went on a trip and we brought iPads, and when we came back, I put them away again because I was like, oh, we're not going to have these. And my kids were like, that's not fair, like that you get to decide. And I thought about it, and I was like, you're right, it's kind of not. So we went into this thing, and it took a while for me to be okay with them having these tools for themselves whenever they want and in any capacity. And I have to say, like, a lot of it is when I would find myself being worried or afraid, it's like I was projecting my fear onto the situation that wasn't even there, or my own biases onto the situation. And I'll give you an example. My girls were really into watching these two sisters, these like blonde, blue-eyed sisters who would like do these challenges. And I just felt like a lot of what they were saying was like culturally, like I didn't agree with it. Like they would talk about food and things being gross, and I just didn't like, I just felt like they're really, for like, you know, cementing this very particular way of being, you know, and I didn't like it. It bothered me. And I would sit with them and I'd be like, you know, I don't like how they're talking about the food. Like they'd be making fun of one kind of meat. And I'm like, well, what's the difference? You know, and I would try and get in there. And then I realized that they weren't even seeing or aware of the things that I was aware of. In fact, I was bringing the attention there by being upset. And so they were watching this video, and after talking about it, so in this one, it was like a food challenge video with Oreos, but they talked about all kinds of food from all over the world. And again, like I said, I didn't like the way they were describing these foods. You know, I thought it was like very xenophobic, like I just was not into it. But when I talked to my kids about it, they were like, did you know there were so many flavors of Oreos? Like they weren't paying attention to that. What they were paying attention to was the fact that these two sisters had found like 57 different flavors of Oreos. And then the next question was, can we go to the store? Because we want to see all those Oreos. Like I had no idea. And so a lot of times that's the situation where like I'm feeling anxious because I'm bringing my own biases and my own feeling that I need to like instruct them and let them be aware of the fact that like I think something's not okay, and like they haven't even, it's not even in their thought process, it's not even what they're focused on. They're focused on something entirely different. So that's one thing. And then another thing I was going to say too is that they're very comfortable with skipping something or leaving something that makes them uncomfortable. Like they might watch a video that's like 35 minutes long, but like they'll scrub through, you know, they'll skip ahead. Like, oh, I don't like what this person's saying, or this doesn't interest me, I'm going to skip ahead. And recently, June was really into Stranger Things, and I hadn't watched it, and she started creating all this art around it, drawings, poems, and I was like, I need to watch Stranger Things because I want to understand all this work she's doing. And so I started watching it. And like, I don't like scary things. You know, I was immediately like, I was so anxious. I was like, oh my God, I can't watch this. And then I was like, what would I do if I were like my kids? And I'm like, oh, I would just skip the part that I don't like. You know, so I actually learned from them. I've learned more from them, like how to use media, than I've taught them. And I think a lot of it is just time and experience. And it's like, it's going to take time to get comfortable with it. But I think the more you can observe and try and observe neutrally, the more you can see how capable they are to remove themselves from situations that make them uncomfortable, ask for help when they're uncomfortable, or to look at something in a different way entirely than the way you think they might be experiencing it. And when you can understand more how they're experiencing it, well, then there's more room, there's more space for you to feel okay with the fact that they are watching it or playing it or whatever the situation might be. Yeah, I'll let someone else go because I can keep on going.
Thank you. Yeah, we are running out of time. I'd like to add the element, you know, of sheltering our kids from truth and reality. And doing that has not helped our society grow. And as an example of what happened recently, I was researching, you know, 60s, you know, protest posters and putting together a post, and Charlotte asked me what I was doing. And I shared with her what had happened, and you know, that someone had died and how, and people were really upset. And she said, oh yeah, I saw that on TikTok. And so she had, I didn't know, because we've been so busy, she had talked to Fred about it already. I still haven't had a chance to connect with him about it. But in that moment, there was a dialogue, and I didn't get overwhelmed with fear and stress and worry that she had seen that. I just said, you know, for people like us who are very highly sensitive, sometimes if you see that, you don't need to watch it. You can know and be informed about what's going on, but you don't need to imprint, you know, an image like that in your brain if it's really upsetting. And you can still talk about it and take actions or do something or protest or whatever. And so we had this conversation, and then she was done and said, okay, let's go back to reading our book. You know, that's really sad. And so this, you know, indulgence in the media became an opportunity. It was just her experiencing something in the world, right? Just like you're walking down the street and you might see something upsetting, and then we just have to deal with it. But if we, you know, put this information under the rug or the skeleton in the closet and never talk about it, it doesn't go away, and it doesn't then raise up responsible humans who are emotionally, physically, and energetically, psychologically capable to meet and talk about and address these things also. So I just wanted to share that as another, you know, example of letting go of our own fear and trusting our kids with media.
We should take one more question before the time runs out.
I have a question. Dhyana, considering what you just said recently about the protest, what do you think about having our children watch the series Roots, which I watched when I was a kid, so they would have some context to why there's racism? You know, because our kids are colorblind. My little one, who's 9 years old, Rebecca, said, why would they treat them any different because they're black? What does the skin make a difference? Because you have to be taught to be a bigot. So what do you think? What do you think about watching Roots so they can see some kind of context to how Africans got here, or how they've been treated historically? What do you think?
I think there are a lot of resources in some of the circles that I you know, share and see posts from. I get a lot of feedback that people want to share the history of African Americans and Africans in a context other than slavery. So I'll just say that, you know. Okay. But then in how we were here in America, you know, there's so much history, there's so many books. I know there's a remake of Roots that I hear was pretty good too. So I think anything, follow any thread. Maria, do you want to add to that? You have a lot of resources and a lot to say more articulately than maybe I can.
I guess what I would say is that you have to, as a white man and as a white family, I'm assuming that your family is fully white, that you really have to take that journey. You really have to take the bull by the horns and decide you're going to take this journey of awareness and understanding. And you have to decide what that's going to mean for your family. But the moment that you say, I'm committed to decolonizing our minds, to understand what people of color have gone through in this world, Roots is just one of them. You know, there's going to be a myriad of resources for you. And I would just say, take each of them. When my daughter was very young, my husband is Black. And so when our daughter was very young, maybe 5, and she'll tell you this on your face to this day, that my husband showed her a book that his father had put together. And in the book, there's images of lynching during the slavery days, both images of whipping slaves and then during the lynching era, post-slavery. So there were all these images, and I just want to let you know that for families of color, these are discussions that happen all the time from the beginning, you know? So we don't really have the luxury of thinking, oh, how to protect our child from X, Y, and Z history, or how to protect our child from having to talk to them about being a Black boy on the street and how to behave when they're on the street if there's police around. Like, we just don't have that luxury. So what I have to say is just take the bull by the horns. If you want to really partake in decolonizing yourself, your family, and being an ally to people of color, then you have to do what you have to do. And just prepare yourself for those discussions in your family. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, I don't know if you saw my comment in the chat, but we'll take all the questions and answer them thoughtfully and thoroughly and put it into a document and share that on the website as a resource for everyone. So thank you for all your questions, and thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who's going to tune in at a later time. There's so much to talk about. We can do this every week, and maybe we will. We're talking about starting a podcast, so you'll have another opportunity to call in.
Can I echo in on something really quick about media? Because I just feel like that's a real point of fear for a lot of us. And I love what you said, Lisa. Thank you so much, all of you. You know how much I love the wisdom that you all bring. It's really helped me. I have an 8, 13, and 15-year-olds, and so I have this experience between each of them experiencing media. And I just want to say, and we're seeing it right now. We're seeing it right now. The media literacy that Generation Z specifically has. I mean, you see it with the millennials, and particularly Generation Z right now, is so media savvy. I mean, I went to college. It took me into getting to college to learn about media literacy, you know, to like question what was being put out there for us to consume. But these kids are growing up in it. And we are the generation that holds all that information as well in terms of how to be media literate. And so what happens is that in the context of your family, your immediate community, whatever is happening there, whatever, if you are educated, college, master's degree, doctorates, if you are from different cultures and you have different languages on your household, if all of you, if one of or two of you do technological work in the tech industry, for example, or you are a construction worker, you're a plumber, it doesn't matter what's the context of your environment, all that knowledge is there, you know? And I feel like being present, bringing all that into your environment already has an effect in your children. So my husband, he's incredible at tech, right? And he makes music, you know, and just having that around in our environment has already inspired the kids in various ways. We're not forcing them to go on that route. We're not saying you can make good money if you become a tech worker. We're just saying, hey, this is a skill that we have.
Maria,
you can absorb it. Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
to interrupt you. We're going to start right now. I invite you to come to Transforming Fear into Love. It's the next meeting on the list. Thank you all for being here. Sorry to cut it so short. To be continued. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.